Hello, welcome to chapter 6, where we will be discussing the old Indian setup. So previously we looked at e4, d6, many lines, but now we'll switch already to how to play the same setup as we do against d4. So d4, of course, we go d6, and the main move we'll look at is knight f3. But before that, let's focus what happens after c4. So c4 is like a normal queen's pawn play move. But here black has a very interesting option to go e5. Of course, we could also do knight f6 and kind of do our setup like that. But e5 is like called Ukrainian defense. It's similar to Philidor endgame, if white takes the pawn and exchanges the queens. So just to mention knight f3, yeah, they can ignore our pawn and continue development. That will just transpose to what we usually play to Old Indian. If they do take the pawn, then we get a kind of similar situation from the e4 Philidor endgame, but the main difference is this pawn already is on c4. So this is actually to black's advantage. So queen takes, king takes, knight c3, and you don't need to know much theory here, just the main setup, how black puts their pieces. So the good moves to start is either bishop e6, but I like just c6. What is our idea? We will defend e5 pawn with the f6, and we intend to put the king into safe square c7, yeah, out of d line. So for example, white could play maybe bad move, yeah, just to illustrate, not bad move, but a kind of dubious move, because white is intending maybe to develop like this, yeah, just to illustrate our plan, how we usually set up the pieces. So black will go knight here, typical place for the knight, f6, defend the pawn, and actually white misplaced the knight here like this, and we usually intend to protect the c5 square with the pawn here. So king will be going to c7, of course, and next we could also think about maybe this knight also has this maneuver and so on. We can improvise from here, but that's usually the setup you want with black in this queenless middle game. So let's say white plays knight f3 instead, but our piece setup doesn't change. Yeah, they tried different idea with g3. We hit this pawn, and you see the setup kind of remains the same. Put the knight here, put the king here, and we're continuing. Yeah, a5 will be next move to get the square safe, and that's how we play this endgame. So you could try out this e5 move. It's very interesting. Most of the time, like maybe on lower levels, they will take, but good players don't take this pawn. They would go knight f3 most likely, transposing back. What if they go d5? Then we could play our own setup, yeah, like knight f6, bishop e7. But here it gives us additional option to go in a bit King's Indian way structure. So we didn't play knight f6 yet, so always we have this f5 opportunity in future. So let's see a couple moves. More analysis is in Lichess study I prepared, so you can check if you kind of want to prepare if opponent plays this way against you. Yeah, but here is another typical move, a5. Once they play d5, c5 is weak, so we kind of prepare to entrench the knight there. Typical King's Indian stuff. And here just wanted to show you one little trick. Of course you could delay this knight f6 and play bishop g7 and f5 perhaps, but with knight e7. But here's a nice trick to remember. If they go bishop g5 early, this is a typical trick. You can even pause the video and think here, how can black do a nice little tactic? And the answer is knight d5. When this bishop is looking against this bishop, we always have this typical tactic We need to calculate, of course, what happens, but here it just works because knight takes back. So you can play like this. Maybe white could go like bishop d3 first, do a different setup, but you see, we always we can delay this knight f6 if we want, even put the knight here and play f5, something like this. So, and we get a very good King's Indian structure here. So another idea, if they go d5, yeah, you could play our own our setup, old Indian, but you have another option to just switch to a good King's Indian play, because we didn't put the knight early on f6. Okay, so that's d5. Another interesting move for white is knight c3. We could maybe take on d4, but that leads to kind of English opening a bit, because they go, you have to know the theory here, like when they go queen d2 and intend this setup. So it's better, according to our setup, just to defend the pawn, and we're basically switching to old Indian setup. We go like this, and if they go knight f3, we're transposing back what we'll see. But if they push early this d5, wanted to show you how to play here. Knight c5 is the idea, because they immediately leave the square for our knight. They gain the space, yeah, but the downside is they give away the square. So we can go like this, and if they defend with the queen, now very important move, entrench the knight here and keep it safe. And for example, some moves like h3 they could play, probably a good move, yeah, trying to expand on the king side. But we also have our own counterplay. Yeah, this knight is nice. We might go knight e8 and organize some f5 in future. So this is reminds me very much of King's Indian structures. So another move, maybe knight f3. And here we have a very nice idea with black. Go bishop g4. The idea is to exchange the knight here. So that will leave g5 square weakened, where we next will try to exchange dark square bishops. So for example, castles, knight fd7, bishop e3. Now we exchange, and now we exchange the bad bishop, and black should be fine. So maybe another try would be, instead of going d5, knight g2, but then we switch to our kind of setup like this. Reminds me of Zemish structure in King's Indian. We can castle, and we could go for some quick f5 perhaps, or even bishop g5 exchange like this. Seems very complicated. I leave more analysis in the study. So okay, so this e5 is very interesting. Let's check quickly how to play against a London system. If they play bishop f4, or even if knight f3, bishop f4, basically it will be the same. I suggest two ways to fight against it. One is trying for quick e5 like this, and g6, kind of King's Indian way, trying to push e5 by support of this bishop, since we didn't put the knight here. So how could this go? If they play e4, then we go here, and we intend now to play e5. So if they play e5 themselves, trying to not allow this, we can develop the knight through h6 to f5. So a couple interesting lines, knight c3, knight f5. And now if they try to kick our knight, we have a nice tactic, simplifying knight d4, queen d4, and we win the piece back with good play here. Okay, and what if they go e4? Yeah, e4 we checked. What if they go knight c3? Yeah, then we intend again e5. We managed to do it. They exchange. Yeah, we gain the tempo on this bishop, and we could put the knight on f6. Maybe you could consider e7, but knight f6 is kind of more active. And play a similar structure. Instead, the bishop was on g7, not e7. So that's one way to fight against London. The other is to play more of the c6, queen c7 early ideas, or queen a5 to support e5 anyway. So that's like more closer to what we set up, to our setup with black. So you could choose between these two, whichever you like more. Here, for example, if they go knight c3, we could use queen a5 plan. Yeah, queen a5 is very annoying, pinning this knight. And here a3, they don't manage to play it before. We can immediately pin the knight, and either we will exchange for the dark square bishop or double the pawns here. So that's a good line to remember, queen a5. If they don't play knight c3, let's say they play e3, a normal move, then we can actually go for this bishop. Very interesting idea. And we could chase this bishop, and since the bishop left c1, we could always throw in this queen b6 idea. They sack the pawn. You shouldn't take such poison pawns, but go after the dark square bishop. Yeah, they might go chase our queen, but if we manage to exchange this dark square bishop, it's a complicated game, but black is already more than fine, I think. So interesting idea immediately to go after this bishop before they manage to play h3. So if they play something like knight bd2, again, this knight h5 is interesting, but like in a more traditional way, you could play this setup with those knights and queen c7 preparing e5. So how this would go like this. If they allow, we go e5. Let's say they don't allow us this, so this will get messy game. Yeah, our knight is also hanging, and some crazy lines here, but black is fine. You can check more in the study. So two ways to fight against London. One is early knight d7 with g6 and trying to push e5, and the other is in more traditional way, develop both knights like we do in Philidor, and then basically try with the queen c7 and knight bd7 to push e5. So okay, let's go to the main lines. So if white plays c4, this is an interesting move, but usually they start with knight f3, not allowing e5, and that's kind of the main move. We go knight f6, of course. First thing, we bring the knights to their places, and c4 next. So if they go knight c3, that will just basically transpose to the e4 lines, yeah, what we've seen in previous chapters. So knight f6, c4. What we do next, of course, we want to support e5, so we go knight bd7, knight c3, and e5. And here is, I would say, the start of the old Indian defense setup. White has many ways to play here. I've chosen just a couple systems to illustrate what are the plans for black. So main move is e4, but let's check out some other lines first. Bishop g5 is usually played when white intends e3 next. So we do our own moves. Bishop e7, e3, castles, queen c2, and c6 are all standard moves. Yeah, we developed the knights, fought for the center, brought the bishop, castled, and finally third stage c6 move. And for most players that will be just enough until here, but if you want to know more, let's check a couple moves, like for example what happens after castles. Then black has a very nice idea here, concrete calculation, ed. Yeah, we take this pawn. Usually we don't want to kind of give away the center, but here it's working because of the concrete reason. Here we can go d5 with good play. If knight takes, then d5 anyway. And the problem is, well, not the problem, but we're kind of opening up the center more and kind of trying to expose the white king castle queen side. Kind of the forcing line continues this way. Yeah, they take here, they inflict this IQP on us, but we have very good play here. If rook takes, this is super risky for white. We have a big attack here going on like that. If they move the king out of the c file, we just play with the isolated queen's pawn like this. even giving some checks and getting some good counterplay here. So bishop g5, yeah. Maybe they could play another move like bishop d3, for example. And then it gets complex if white plays, for example, h4, yeah, the typical sacrifice. We don't really want to take and open the h file on us. So again, we could play in the center. Very good move, ed. And bring the rook, castles long, and basically chances for both sides. We're gonna attack with our own queenside pawns as well. So what else? Bishop e2 might be played. But here is a nice idea. If they play just normal moves, often we can exchange these bishops like this. Just knight e8, exchange our bad bishop. So takes, castles, a knight can remaneuver, and we're playing, yeah, we managed to exchange bad piece. We can set up the pieces like this, and with mutual chances again. So this bishop g5 is interesting, but not so critical. So another setup, very important one, is the Fianchetto line. So one of the most solid ways usually against King's Indian to play for white. So what do? We develop normally. Bishop e7, bishop g2. Here you can, for blitz, maybe even delay the castle, do a similar thing like black line, where we played against e4. But the big difference is c4 is already here. So white will have an easier time to expand on the queen side. So, but you could experiment with this in blitz, like delaying the castle, and just to illustrate some interesting line here would be like if they do this h3 move, but usually that's like creating a hook for us. So how do we start pressuring their king side? Something like this, yeah, you could improvise, and we're delaying the castle. So that's an interesting way to play. But of course, if white knows what to do next, they should probably expand on the queen side. Our attack is probably not going to work, so you can experiment on your own risk in the blitz here, this line. So just wanted to mention that you can maybe try it, yeah, in rapid time controls. So, but usually we want to castle and then play c6. So that's standard kind of tabia position, yeah. Fianchetto, in the Fianchetto line. And very important is whenever white plays e4, that basically signals us that they close their bishop, and we can go for this a6 b5 plan. So that's exactly what we do here, a6. And if they try playing slowly, we can just expand on the queen side. If they go fancy, yeah, with this move, trying to break our structure, we can just ignore it. For the moment, everything is defended, so they could exchange a couple times, but that's not a big deal. We could exchange more pieces, and black is fine here. So something like this could happen. So h3 not really worrying. a4, but against a4 we have a typical move, a5, fixing this pawn, getting the b4 square. And now a very important plan for black, how to set up pieces coming up. So if they played d5 early, that's a bit dubious because they're giving this nice square for the knight, and we can set up pieces nicely, even go for some weak c4 pawn, for example, yeah, and knight exchanges on c1. We're okay here. Maybe knight d3, but then we have a nice kind of provoking move, bishop g4. If they go here, knight b3 can come to and take the bishop again, with excellent play for black. Or if they try to exchange their supposed bad bishop, we can again go for even knight d4 here. So it's d5 early is a bit dubious. They play mostly h3, trying to keep all the center intact and kind of pressure us on space. But now our typical plan is revealed, how we set up next. So usually in the Philidor we don't like to take on d4, but here in Old Indian setup, it's actually a good idea to take it, because that frees up the square on c5 for the knight. First we put the bishop out of the way, kind of pressuring a bit e4. This reminds me very much of the King's Indian Fianchetto line, where we also pressure e4 like that. And next we put this knight on c5. Notice where the knights will be going. Queen is going here for the moment. We make our kind of all normal moves, g6, maybe preventing knight f5, but also the bishop might jump to g7. And the knights are going to b4 and c5. We have to kind of remember these maneuvers. So yeah, the game could continue. Yeah, of course, white could have played many different ways. I just want you to remember the setup, what we usually do, how these knights get there. One knight goes to b4 like this, and another kind of, they switch places, they go like this. And that's a very double-edged position. You can play for 3 results, I think. So that's how we set up against kind of a4 and this Fianchetto line in general. What else they could play? Well, basically we're going now to the main move e4. That would be like a classical variation of bishop e2. Let's see that. So we go into classical line bishop e4 together with bishop e2. It reminds me very much of the way white plays against King's Indian. The main difference is, of course, bishop is on e7, not g7. So we castle. You could again experiment with this, but I don't think, like in more longer games, this won't work. Yeah, this black line, because white already has more space here. Well, you could try even playing like this, yeah, in blitz. But castle is more solid. Now white castles as well. If g4, this doesn't work. Yeah, similar to Shirov attack, but it doesn't work here. Black has a nice counter move, for example, against h3. They could counter in the center and do this, and knight escapes then. Or if they first take before kicking the knight on e5, then we take back. Basically, if the queens get exchanged, we're more than fine, and we're actually winning a pawn here. So this g4 aggressive move doesn't work here. Castles. And c6, and we have the main position in the classical variation of the old Indian setup. Basically, the c6 move, similar as in e4 systems, controls, yeah, does a couple of things. Controls the center and b5 square. Also, in this kind of setup, we have additional idea of queen e8. This queen and bishop switch, and the bishop can jump out on the queen side somewhere, yeah, on b6 or a5. And also c6 prepares a a6 b5 idea as usual. And against d5, we sometimes have an option to even close the position with c5. So this is 6 is very useful to us. So our standard move. And the main most dangerous move, I think, in the position is bishop e3, where I will not lie, yeah? If white knows all his stuff, he will get slight advantage for sure. So, but still playable positions for black. So let's check other moves. First thing, b4 doesn't quite work. White is a bit over optimistic here, so we can strike in the center and kind of against his flank play. And here, if they take with the queen, probably that's the best option. We can start exchanging queens. If they exchange, we have nothing to worry about. Yeah, we can even strike in the center here. If they don't exchange, we can bring the knight into the center, and this is equal position. But if they take with the knight, then we have excellent move d5, because this pawn now is hanging. So ed, and we take the pawn hitting the knight. So center gets blown out, and we're doing great here. So b4 doesn't quite work. If they're too aggressive early on to expand on the queen side. What's next? d5 is an interesting move. Mainly it will probably transpose to other lines, but we could do this a5, queen c2, queen c7 stuff, and just continue normally with knight c5 and do our typical old Indian moves. So another idea would be rook e1 with white. So the standard move, we prepare b5. Usually our next plan is a6, and white could stop it in many ways or allow it. So well, a4 is actually trying to stop it. For the moment, maybe we are threatening to play it, so they might play a4, but it's not a good move. We do our typical fixing of the pawn, a5. Suddenly we change our minds and we fix this b4 square. And our typical plan, like I shown you against the Fianchetto line, next we're gonna play rook e8. At the moment, take on d4, put the bishop back, and knight c5. That's the main plan you should know. So other moves, let's say h3. If they allow us, at the moment we're gonna push b5. They usually stop b4 advance at this moment, but then our bishop comes to b7 and we're doing okay. For example, here black setups the pieces like this, and we have a nice play going on here. So h3, slow move. Maybe d5, probably one of the better tries. Knight c5, that allows knight c5, and for example, if bishop retreats defending e4, we entrench the knight and go for this sort of setup. Queen on b8 with, again, play on the queen side. So but d5, yeah, definitely interesting move. Bishop f1 most likely will be played. Again, we expand b5, and something like this might go on. At the moment, we usually try to take on d4, like here, and go for some active play. Messy position, yeah, more in the study. You can investigate. Queen c2, very popular move. Here I just wanted to mention additional idea. You could also try against slower moves. This queen e8 plan, yeah, I mentioned with c6 move. Queen e8 is for blitz rapid mainly. If white plays kind of slow moves, you can do this maneuver, queen and bishop switch. And ed, for example, yeah, knight nicely blocks now this d6 pawn from attack, and the bishop jumps out. Yeah, he's made this bad bishop bounce here, and for example, queen can get to the suddenly the king side. So this queen e8 you can experiment with. Yeah, this bishop remaneuver, so very interesting. But the main move would be a6, preparing b5. Of course, we get out of the d file. Yeah, the rook is looking now. Tactics are hanging here. So bishop g5, for example. Again, we go for our all standard moves, rook e8. And here we can even try for g5 and something like this. Yeah, you see now, sometimes we have an option to just bypass this pawn because we already move on c6. So there is no en passant for white. Yeah, that's why c6 is useful move. And then the game kind of switches more to the king side usually. So this queen c2. But the main move, of course, is bishop e3. So how do we play against that? The main line, according to theory, is also a6, but I'm a bit worried after d5. White gets excellent play on the queen side here. He has more space, and this bishop is very nicely placed here to support any attacks there. They have just basically more space and can do queenside play easier than us. So I looked at some courses and found this move, rook e8. This is called the Demchenko plan, and this gives white a bit of a dilemma whether to push d5 immediately or wait with it. So they could wait with it, but at some moment we might just take on d4. So usually rook e8 also frees up the square, typical like against d4 for the knight to remaneuver to a better kingside position. And so most likely white will play d5 because they see that our rook got out here. Now he's kind of blocked on the e file. Yeah, you would want in close position to support this break f5. So, but we do our typical plan. Now we brought the rook here, so knight has this maneuver. And we don't rush to take on d5. That's very important. Yeah, if you take early, that will just help white. It opens their bishops on the queen side, and they will have excellent play there. So instead of that, we just maneuver the knight, we improve the pieces and get ready for their queenside attack. So usually they will go knight e1, typical maneuver like in King's Indian, yeah, to remaneuver the knight, prepare some f3 for potential f5, and push the pawns. So instead of knight e1, what if they take this pawn? That's usually a bad idea if they don't have any follow-up, yeah, but here they play c5, trying to break our structure. Then we have this move, and we're kind of doing okay here. We managed to put our active pieces here, and okay, we have some weak pawn, but we have lots of square for our pieces that they are active, so this doesn't quite work, this capture with c5. Knight e1, you should, from good players, yeah, you should expect to know this typical play, and they remaneuver the knight. And now an important idea for black, we go h6. Why is this move? We want to at some moment put the bishop on g5 and just trade this dark square bishop. This is our bad bishop, so we try doing that. We give this idea for ourselves in future. f3, for example, how do we play against that? It's a moment we take on d5 and then go knight h5, you see, and then bishop g5 might actually arrive there. So let's check the other move. After h6 they go b4. Then we finish development, and rook c1 might be a move, yeah, to support the queenside push. If they go immediately a4, we have a typical a5 move, stopping them. If b5, suddenly we can close again. You see why the c6 is important. We can close all their queenside, and now the game moves only on the king side, so where we have more kind of pieces there. So very important, you can at some moment even close the position. So usually they would try to open it up, but then we can close it again, yeah, like this. Okay, they open the b line, but we're defending here, so we could defend like this, bring the queen back, and do some sort of maneuvers. And h5 we will also play on the king side. Yeah, they're pressuring us on the queen side, but we have our own counter chances. So you want to at least have some counter chances, yeah, not to defend passively in the setup. So but rook c1 is the main move. But then we can do this. Now we're ready to take on d5, and we can block their queen side like this with b5 move. And I would not lie, white maybe has some slight edge because they still have more space, yeah, but we're fighting. We have our own plans, like for example knight h7 to exchange the bishops and so on. So it's a fighting game. Yeah, if white knows very well the theory, they usually get advantage, yeah, slight advantage here, but at below 2000 level I don't think they will know all these moves. So you can easily play the setup against everything basically, yeah. And now we know how to do it against d4, yeah, old Indian setup. So in the final chapter we're gonna check how the setup works against any other move besides e4 and d4. So see you there. Thanks for watching, and until next time.